Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome all. Thank you all for coming. My name is Tarek Al Aris, and I'm in Middle Eastern Studies, and I will be introducing, moderating, and taking part in this roundtable discussion with our guest, Academy Award winner Volker Schrondorff, and our also visiting professors at Dartmouth, Professor Huda Barakat, who's the Montgomery Fellow, and Professor Rabi' Amroui, who's the Harris visiting professor. And thank you for the Harris for also bringing Volker to Dartmouth and for the possibility of having this conversation. The conversation we're going to have is about a film called The Circle of Deceit that has been so influential. I mean, probably all to Middle East cinema, to global cinema. Like every single film about the Lebanese Civil War after Volker's film has been, you see scenes from it. You know, West Beirut, or it's a reaction to it. Jocelyn Saab's work, or so you know, his film has really influenced Maroon Baghdadi. I mean, it's very, very important for so many reasons, both within his own kind of filmography or career as a filmmaker, but also in terms of how it also affected other forms of representations of war and also of Lebanese civil war more particularly. And his work also being in Lebanon during the war, filming this film in 1980, you know, you're still in the middle of the civil war, was a feat, and also was also an opportunity to work with a lot of, aspiring filmmakers or people who were working on the set with him, who eventually became very important filmmakers in their own right. So I think this is a very important film in terms of the genre of film, and also within his, European cinema, but also within a kind of a global Middle East context, thinking about visual representation and war and so on. So what we're gonna do today is that we're gonna show maybe some clips from the film just to kind of put you in the mood a little bit, and then start the conversation and try to kind of think about film and also the context, and ask Volker about to give us a little bit more context and background of what he's doing. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a scene from the film. And then I'm gonna turn off some of the lights. I'm not gonna put. So I'm not gonna put the total darkness, but there is one function. Scene 4. Just the context. This is Bruno Ganz, the famous German actor, and he plays the role of Georg Leshter, who's a journalist who comes to Lebanon to write a story about the war. And of course, he just gets arrested by the militiamen, and we'll see what will happen. Okay. So we'll stop here. Please, everyone, join me in welcoming Volker Schrondorff, Rabi' Amroui, and Huda Barakat.
And Tarek Haris.
So maybe, Volker, just a first question to start. Like, could you tell us a little bit about the film, the background, Beirut, what got you interested, some of the important, experiences you had there while filming?
Thank you. Welcome. I was just saying it's a hard act to follow. When I started this project, I had no idea about the war in Lebanon or anything. I just thought I wanted to get out of Germany and deal with the rest of the world. Somehow about the conflicts in the world, and a little bit like this journalist who volunteers to be a war journalist. which is a special type of journalists. And at that period, while I was still considering Vietnam, Argentina, or whatnot, I came upon a book, a novel, written by Nicholas Born, a German writer who was more of a poet and who had just died that week, so I've never known him. But this is how come I was attracted to the novel, and I read it. And it was basically the story of the movie. So the film may look at first sight like a reportage or a documentary. In fact, it's a literary adaptation. And like always when you do a literary adaptation, you don't necessarily go to the places where it happened. I thought Beirut, Lebanon, must be impossible to shoot there. But I wanted to go and look to have an idea and then maybe recreate the action in Algiers, another town on the Mediterranean with white buildings, and a town I knew because I had been there actually during the Algerian War, towards the end of the Algerian War, when the journalists were all living in a hotel and you couldn't go out without being shot at. And so somehow Algiers, Beirut made sense to me, and actually one of the Maroun Baghdadi, whom you mentioned, a filmmaker from Algeria, then went to Beirut to make a movie. Anyhow, so it was not. Didn't know anything about the specifics of the Lebanese war and the situation there. It was more the idea, one of us, a Westerner, being confronted with the war zone. And let's say the opposite of the saturated, self-content Western Europe, or Western Germany, exactly. So when we got to Beirut on our kind of scouting tour, I immediately met a young Lebanese filmmaker, Jocelyne Saab. She passed away a few years ago, and she had done specially a documentary about the children during the war and other things. And she, we became quickly friends, and she took me around to the places where she had been filming. And then I met a German woman who was also living in Beirut, but she was very militant with the PLO, and especially with the Red Crescent, and the hospital in the camp, the Arafat's brother was the head of. And so she took me there. And so that was all for me, I mean, more than eye-opening. It was absolutely incredible, because on the one hand, there was the war, and on the other hand, there was almost like a peaceful life, like a normal life going on. And when we spoke about our project and so, everybody was very forthcoming to tell us what's happening and how it all started. Well, anyhow, when they learned that we were going to shoot this maybe in Algeria, they were appalled. Get out of here. You should do it here. This is our war. This is our city suffering. This is our people dying. You have to do it here. And my assistant was Régis Varnier, who then became a filmmaker himself, a very good one. So we said, well, if they are living here and we want to make a movie about that, the least we could do is share the risk of living here as they do. So let's do it here. And of course, the production said, "Are you crazy? It's impossible. You will never get insurance for anything, and nobody wants to come." Actually, at that point, I already had Bruno Ganz in mind for the journalist, and I had Romy Schneider in mind for the part of the woman who is living in Beirut throughout the war. So that production said, well, you cannot go with Romy Schneider anywhere without having insurance. So, and it's out of the question to have insurance there. We had to give up on her. Hard for me because I always wanted to make a film with her. We were both Germans living in France. But it was even harder for Bruno Ganz because they had a brief affair and he really wanted to work with her and vice versa. Okay, kill your darlings, literally, in that case. So we started prepping and we found partners in Lebanon. We brought all the equipment over by boat there was no generator to have power and so on. So we had our trucks drive from Munich to Genova, and from there by boat to Junie. And as they came off the boat and had to now Junie is the port, the harbor of Beirut, where recently that huge explosion was a few years ago. And as the truck drove out of the harbor, and that's in, how should I say, you know that better, East Beirut. And they had to cross Ashrafiyeh, the say Maronite part of Beirut, and then cross the Green Line in order to reach West Beirut, where we were located. Well, already our trucks were being shot at. So they arrived at the hotel, the brave Bavarian drivers, and so we're not really prepared to see their equipment with a lot of bullet holes all of a sudden. But we never ever had another incident like this. So this was just a scare to prepare us to what might be coming. And we did one more thing. That was before the trucks arrived. It was in November of whatever, 79 probably. And we knew that we were planning to shoot in February of 1980 or so. And we said, well, let's try what can be done. And it was the scene where Bruno Ganz is running through these empty streets. So there we didn't need any equipment, and so we just had the camera there and the cinematographer, myself and the assistant, and a local special effects man from Lebanon who set up some explosions. And we drove, he was running, and we drove and followed him through that part which used to be the center of Beirut, and meantime was between the lines. It was, the whole zone was off limit and was controlled by the Syrian army, like a puffer zone, like a zone in between the two factions, the main factions, east and west, and in between with this no man's land. And so we prepared for this shooting carefully. I sent Régis Varnier over to the Christian side to tell them we were going to shoot in the no man's land, and we were going to have some explosions coming off. So please don't shoot back. This is just fake explosions. And the same thing with our friend Monica Maurer, who was the liaison to the PLO, and the Morabitun, or who else the other factions were, to tell them if there is any shooting, it's just for the movies. It's all fake. And it was what was at the time called a relative quiet. There were always these periods, relative quiet, and then were periods where it's getting hotter, like the weather map. You know, you could never exactly know why. So we shot it, and the shooting all went well technically, and it's this amazing footage. But the problem was, while Bruno was running, all of a sudden, nevertheless, there was sniper fire coming in. And Régis Varnier hurried over to a phone. There was no cell phones, of course, at the time, but to the next available in the city, and called in the east, because you see, even though there was a war, there was still like, you could go back and forth with a certain danger, or anyhow you could call from one side to the other. And I said, well, why are you shooting? We agreed that you wouldn't shoot because we're making a movie. And the response was, yeah, you said that, but since it was raining, we thought you can't be shooting.
That's great.
It's Kafkaesque.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, one of the things that I want to ask one more question, and then maybe open it up to Huda and Rabia also to talk about their work and their own representation of war. But one of the things that we noticed, especially in the clips that we saw, is that in the beginning, Bruno Ganz is very much kind of an observer. And then little by little, he becomes really sucked into the action. He becomes really engulfed by the war. So, I mean, did this happen to you also as a filmmaker? Is the filmmaker or...
No, fortunately, I didn't kill anybody. I mean, not consciously, anyhow. Everybody has his own reactions. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is the curb. Here comes the journalist from the West. We see his family in Hamburg and peaceful and everything, and he is somewhat condescending. What are all these people killing each other, and why do they have a civil war? And slowly he becomes involved in it. I mean, it's not really psychological. It is. He discovers that within his otherwise peaceful nature, way below, there is also this strange instinct of defending yourself, and when he feels that this man, we never understood exactly what this man who fell upon him, whether he tried to strangle him or whether he lost his mind in the panic, but he has to admit that he is no different from the people, the other people who are fighting, and that's how it goes. As for myself and the rest of the crew, it was rather the opposite development. The more we were there, the safer we felt. This partaking in the everyday life of everybody, and we more and more attentive, of course, to the children, to things, but just on the edge of this no man's land between all these destroyed buildings, every morning with a man walking, you know, selling not hot dogs, but little pancakes, kind of rolls with za'atar, with thyme on it, you know. and he was always walking down the street, "Gatto, gatto, gatto." There was nobody there to buy them anymore. The windows of the houses were burned out, and there goes this man, you know, offering these wonderful time breads, which was even more sinister because one of the first and horrible incidents that happened was at Tal al-Zatar, was on the hill of the time where there was a Palestinian camp. Well, anyhow, you see, we had different reactions to it. We'll talk later about Hannah Shikula's reaction, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe this is a question for Huda, because to stay on the same theme, and here, of course, my association is Kurtz in Heart of Darkness, or in Apocalypse Now in Coppola's film, like, where there is this, you know, descent into violence, into the savage, as a form of breakdown, but also as a form of desire, as a form of thrill. And I think in the last scene with Bruno Ganz, you know, there is this, you know, there's something, you know, very violent, but also very erotic in that scene, you know, with the shower, with the wave that kind of explodes, and then with the blood. And of course, Huda, if we think about...
Strange notion of eroticism.
Yes. Well, I don't get it only from me. I mean, if we think about Ahl al-Hawa or Disciples of Passion, like your work, you've been also very interested.
No, excuse me, I'm not there at all. Yani, about the film, for me, it's not, yani, like Lebanese, it's not, I don't have a part of this film. It is not mine. It is not the true of Lebanon, how I lived into the civil war. It's a German film, and it's very good to be a German film if it is a very, very, yani, c'est bien fait. Si c'est bien fait, c'est well done, like a German film. Even this Beirut, it is not mine. It is not my city. It is not, yani, I don't know, because Chandor is here and I love too much. It is not. No, attends. It is not your most beautiful. It is not.
An outsider's look. It's an outsider's look at the war. So I'm interested to hear the insider's look. Yeah.
No, inside, I don't have to give inside. I'm not inside, because I'm a spectator. I'm a Lebanese spectator, and I watch a German film. But I want to tell you that it is not your most beautiful film. And it's what I think about your film, because I admire too much your work. But I think I'm little. I cannot critique the film, but I can tell you how the Lebanese, even those they work with you, and they was when you went to Beirut, they was very happy to share how much they suffer, and maybe an European man gonna maybe help us to understand, or to give a push to our life in Lebanon. So maybe the others, because the Lebanese are always thinking of the others. Yani the other are culpable, and the other have to resolve our problems. So it was welcome. But after that, when they show the film, they was a little, it was a little disappointed because they seen this suffering city only like a decor for a totally different psychological or existential crisis. So I'm not. I'm not thinking like that. But they try to de retrouver, يعني ils voulaient retrouver leur ville. But there is no Beirut for the Beirutin or for the Lebanese. For me, it was really totally a Germanic film, and it was good like this. Yani they was hoping to see some reaction or to see an image of their absurd life, and they don't yani communicate with this. But it is not my opinion. But now, when you take a look to your film, when you watch it, what do you think about something you done maybe 40 years or more?
I've heard this objection, of course, even while we were making it, in the sense that there was always too much action, there was always too much war, too much fire, and however, the book, which was my guideline, was written by a German who went there to write about a journalist who was his neighbor. So otherwise he was more of a poet. So I've followed his look upon the war, and how come that the journalist kind of loses faith in his own job. And it was more about the relation between a war and the media and us. And truly, neither me nor the novelist really were aiming at giving a definite picture of Beirut. However, we were more than in the book trying to include, like, as you say, the absurdity and the normality. Now, we've just seen here, for obvious reasons, some of these more violent scenes, but there are moments of peace when they drink white coffee, when Hana Shigula is sitting in her garden, when Bruno comes to visit her, and where there is this feeling that there is, there is life within the war, and that people are extremely. I mean, the more violent the war was, the more death was ever present, the more in these moments in between people appreciated life, and the fact to still be alive, and that was anyhow the feeling I took home after this experience, and fortunately there was no casualties at all. That feeling, what a privilege it is to be alive, simply. And besides, but I know, and Jocelyn Saab, my very good friend and best help and creative collaborator on the film, this young Lebanese filmmaker, she was always very critical while we were shooting and afterwards, and I understood it, and often said, but Jocelyn, the film you want to see, you have to make. I can't make it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then she did her trilogy about Beirut and the war. Huda, do you want to say something about this idea of representing the war? Because this is also a very important theme in your work.
No, I want to go on with him. You know, you choose some literary book, and you are fan of literature, and you do magnific things. So when you tell us, yes, it was the book, the novel of this Nicholas Bourne. It is not enough. It is not enough. Mm-hmm. Why you choose this kind of not very important book, and why you don't make this novel yours? Why you have to suivre, to follow this novel? I consider very, it is like a German novel. It is not excellent, because I read the novel. It was not sufficient to be Schlondorf oeuvre.
No, maybe I would rather take the blame and say that I by the way, I consider this a good novel, and I think, but maybe I was not at the level of it. It's of course it's a very interesting conversation, because the novelist was not really interested in Lebanon, much less than me, what he was interested is our relationship to the news, to this, that we are kind of like cannibalists waiting every night on television to see the next horror and the next catastrophe, and that like cannibals we are eating these corpses we are daily fed, and it's not the fault of the journalists nor of the networks, but it's the audience, it's us who are asking for that. Otherwise, they wouldn't sell it to us, if we didn't buy it. And that there is this whole... Yeah, no, but this was the purpose. Yeah.
It's a Lebanese, no.
Yeah.
I don't critique the novel or your work as a Lebanese. I'm not concerned by this film. I'm critique the quality of to be limited. You are more intéressant que cette vision cinématographique. C'est pourquoi je vous demande, quand vous regardez aujourd'hui, comment vous trouvez ce travail? En tant que germanique.
Whether as Germanist or at film, I can only say as a filmmaker, I'm astounded how we even managed to do it. So I'm not in any ways blaming myself as a filmmaker. But maybe intellectually, maybe professionally it's good, but intellectually there might be a fault in it, which is not exactly my strength. You see, when maybe this will help. Once the decision was made and that we were going to shoot in Lebanon, in Beirut, despite all the dangers and the insurance, we still had the choice of doing this like with a handheld camera, that to make it look like a reportage, say the way Pontecorvo did the battles of Algiers, or what I called do it like an opera. Do it with a heavy camera, with a crane, and with tracks, and do the opposite. Let's not pretend that this is documentary or a reportage, as make it clear that this is somewhat fiction, despite all the reality in front of it. And in a sense, I'm still glad that we did it, because there are no really 35mm pictures of Beirut at that time in the archives. So at least that was kind of a side product of the film. But if we could have done it otherwise. I see what you mean, but coming there, thought that the representation of the violence, or the other way around, the violence struck me more than what you call the absurdity of life that goes on.
We're gonna get Rabia.
Let's put it that way. The fault is not in the representation. The fault is in the perception, in the way I saw it.
He'll have to he has to convince you at dinner after. I want to move to Rabia and his experience, actually, both as an actor and as a filmmaker. And as an actor in the film Je veux voir, I Want to See, by Joanna Hajitouma Khalil Jrej, where he played also alongside Catherine Deneuve in Beirut, and also your work in terms of representing war, like your artistic and theoretical work, where you question the power of the image, or the image as something that could represent something. So I'm just wondering if you want to join into this.
Maybe it makes. So maybe.
Plus puissant que votre film. En tant que film, vous êtes génial.
Non, c'est un aparté.
You can tell me.
So anyway, it's after the war 2006, which was like a very horrible war between Israel and Lebanon. After 2 years, like in 2008, Khalil and Joanna, a couple filmmaker, they wanted to do a film about this war, specifically this war, and they named their film I Want to See. And it is a film about a star icon from the cinema, Catherine Deneuve. This is the film, huh? It's also in reality, but this is the film. It's an icon coming to Lebanon to make a gala for Lebanon. And there she asks to take her to see the destruction, and of course, like the French ambassador says, no, it's not that, but she insisted to see. And I'm the one who takes her in the film as like I'm the friend of this filmmakers. And I take her in a journey. It's a road movie in Lebanon, showing her, and she sees and she doesn't see at the same time, because like it's 2 years, and there was like, actually they were cleaning the rubbles at that time, not so you don't see the destructions. And this film, I have to say that it's me and Catherine Deneuve. My French is very poor. At that time, it was poorer than now. It's much more poor than now. And she doesn't speak Arabic, of course. And the only condition in the film was we should not speak in English, both of us. So either I have to speak her in Arabic or with my French. And they gave us, they did the script, the dialogues. It was all scripted. So they give it to us, but we don't know the complete dialogue. I don't know what is her part. She doesn't know my part. And they put us in front of the camera, but it was all set up, all staged in other ways. And I don't want to talk about like how it went, but I want to talk about the reaction of the audience, the spectator. I think it was like, of course, like the Lebanese, after like talking, especially with the generations that came after the Civil War, those who did not really experience the Civil War, talking about wars, there was not fighting. And then 2006 came, and they lived it, although they lived it from far. But it was violent because we were isolated, and we could not go out from Lebanon, and we were bombarded. So after this, two filmmakers came to tell the story with an icon, Catherine Deneuve, with her beauty, blonde, want to tell these Lebanese about their suffering. I think it was the most, the film #1 hit in articles that it was the majority that they hated it. They attacked it. Not like politicians, film critics, literature, poets, whatever you imagine, like people, they don't try, they wrote about this film. It's like, it was like really significant to see all of this. And all of those people considered this film as a documentary film. So there's, for example, a scene, because it's a road movie, and she's all the time in the car, so I park the car at some point, and I come back, and because she's tired, she sleeps, like a little bit. And this was like something unacceptable for the Lebanese people. How come Catherine Deneuve see all this suffering and she sleeps? This is unacceptable. And moreover, she did not shed a tear in the film. All the film, she saw all this. So what I want to say is like, it's something that I experienced just right after the Civil War, when I started to do my own work as well. I saw a piece by a theater maker who lives in France. He came to Lebanon with a piece about the Civil War. But this theater maker, he lived in Paris, most of the Lebanese war. Huh? No, not Wajdi Mawad. Another one. So he came, he's a good director. Anyway, he came and I saw, with the Lebanese, but I saw myself, my reaction was like, come on, you were out of Lebanon all these years, and you're coming to tell me about my war, my life? It's not good. I was like really so harsh with my opinion. And it took me a while actually to flip the regard, the gaze to my own works, and to put myself also as like a spectator, sewing and watching my works, and I see the same thing. What is this you telling me about this war? It's me, huh? So what I want to tell from this, that actually representation has this problem all the time. It cannot like convince all the people. It's my story, as Schlondorf, as Volker said, that it's my story. If you have your story, tell it. This is my story. And I convinced from that time that I cannot convince all the people. the work that I'm doing, I'm sharing this with the audience. I know that there are some people will be interested, and maybe a lot not interested. It will not touch them. Maybe it provoked them. Whatever. This is my work. I do my work because I want to do it. I'm not doing it for them. And this is something I learned from this. There's another anecdote. Sorry, I want just to tell one thing. Is also like it's a confusion with the audience, but this time it was another film that I played in it. It's with a filmmaker, his name Ghassan Salhab. It was his first feature film called Ashbah Beirut, The Ghosts of Beirut. And in this film there is two parts. Part this fiction, and a part that he start to interview the actors and asking us about our experience during the Civil War. And my part was like my introduction was actually related to your film, and not to your film, but it's in a way to my conviction and my thoughts that we are in the Civil War. We are all were engaged in this war in a way and another. There were levels, of course, but we were all involved and engaged. No one has clean hand. And the film here, it says the same thing. Actually, this journalist came to Beirut and he became a criminal. He committed a crime and he leaves. And this is like metaphorically, it says like no one is clean. Once you are there, even if you don't do anything, you just watch, just like as a viewer, you are involved. So what I want to say that this is the story, I decided to go to see the film in the cinema with the people, the Ghassan's Salhab film, Ashbah Beirut. And I was alone. I came and I sat, and the film started. Of course, like I'm not Catherine Deneuve, nobody noticed me. I'm like one of these people. And then suddenly my part came when I started to do this interview, saying like, no one from us, the Lebanese, has clean hands. We are all, this way, I was like young at that time. I was like so enthusiastic and like, we are all engaged in this war. And I started to hear like voices in the cinema from the audience. You are alone, fuck you, you're like shit. They started to insult the character in the cinema. And I was like in my seats, I was like, oh God, I don't want anyone to see me. So, okay, I just finished it. But also this is the confusion between fiction and real and cinema. And I don't know, at the end, like, it's just a part of millions of infinities of point of view. And I don't think one can. No, I'm not.
We are not
responding
talking
to you. I'm just seriously. I wanted to say this before.
I want to comment what you are talking about because I'm convinced. But films, it's not only ideas. It's not only to convince. It's not convictions. Film, he has to touch you. Yani, he has to remove things. He has to put something in your stomach. If there is no this, yani, the film is not totally beautiful œuvre.
I agree.
So it wasn't.
Maintenant, je vous comprends mieux. Because now, if I'm asked to criticize my own film, I'm well aware of that because the film did not work with the audience. The film did not touch the audience. It was impressing filmmakers and whatever. But and Bruno Ganz is a wonderful actor. Everybody loves, but nobody loved him in that part, and not because of the ending. Somehow, from the beginning, there was a lack of communication with the audience. There was a lack of empathy somehow. The problem is in the writing of his character. Not in the cast was wonderful. He could almost have saved it, but he could not really save it because the character was not a real person. It was a concoction. It was a construction, and so exactly as you say, a film only moves the audience, or the audience likes a film or dislikes a film, only according to an emotional experience they had while watching the film. If that doesn't happen, then all the effort for the rest is in vain. We were partly, or even me, were partly aware of it at the time of the shooting, but at the same time we were so impressed by what you may call production value, meaning the explosions, the fire, the set, the street. When do you have a whole city as a set at your disposal? That we forgot that. But there is something missing at the core of the film, and. But even the reviewers were not really aware of that. They said, no, but the film is not clear. They wanted to know, but which side is the good side? Why did the war start? But in fact, and that I think now I get what you meant from the beginning, is that the character of this journalist is somewhat of a construction, is not really enough. That blame I'm willing to take because I had to bear the consequence of it. The film was expensive; it had no audience, a bit in Paris, but generally it was not a. It didn't touch the audience. There was no positive word of mouth.
Maybe one last questions, and then maybe we open it up also to the audience. The question that's coming out here also from Rabia's description is that normally when we think about representation, you hold the camera, you have a certain responsibility, right? And the question of ethics becomes about what can I show? Can I show from my subject position? Am I an outsider or an insider? Did I live through the experience, or I'm coming from the outside? So when we think about representation, it's usually linked to a question of ethics and responsibility. So I'm wondering, you're saying, and so you're saying maybe no, that's the question of ethics and responsibility should not be, like there is no representation, or representation is not part of responsibility. Everyone shows what he or she or they want or can show. But you're also saying the spectator is complicit as well. There is no spectator, because the spectator, the audience, is also has to be involved in what is being seen or is pulled into it somehow. Just like Bruno Ganz in this film, he's pulled into the war, although...
Yeah, but the spectator should have been pulled into the war instead of Bruno Ganz. Yes. That unfortunately is true. As to the representation, what you mean, that was the choice. Do we do documentary, or do we, I use this expression opera, meaning do we grand staging, and that was one choice. Another choice that was important, and I think that succeeded, the relationship between war, and especially in the extreme civil war, and the media. How much all these fighters are eager to be filmed immediately. As soon as you come with the camera, it's not at all go away, we're doing dirty business here, we don't want this to be shown. On the contrary, which one do you want me to shoot? You know, should I chop his head off? I mean, they're eager. They're almost, there wouldn't be any fighting if there was no camera. It's that is the sinister truth, and I think that came off very well. And of course, on purpose, we didn't want to show, you know, the good ones, the bad ones. How did it all happen? Because as many people as you met in Beirut, as many different explanations you would get. Even the factions among themselves didn't exactly know in as far they were different. The Amal from the Murabitum, from the and so on and so on. I mean, it's like. Certain business with Church Row in the United States, you know, there are so many different churches, and you don't really know what is really truly the difference. And that was a bit. Now, if all these churches were fighting each other, as they did in the 30 Years' War in Europe, then you would have an image of what a civil war is like.
Maybe one last observation. In a previous interview, Volker, you said that you growing up in Germany right after the Second World War, or during actually, that somehow that experience has also shaped your perception of war. So could you maybe link your, and also the division of Berlin, could you link that to the division of Beirut, or is there any?
No, it's not that complicated. Yeah, actually, I was born in March '39, so I was in the middle of the war. I was 5 and later 6 years old, so I was seeing what was going on. But when you grew up like that, well, you don't know anything different. I was very astonished when at age 15 I came to Paris, and for the first time I saw a city that had not been bombed. Until then, a city for me consisted to at least 50% of ruins. So that's what I meant when I came to Beirut. I didn't feel, it didn't seem exotic to me at all. It had almost a familiar feeling.
Okay, I think...
And we did, I mean, like you see there, the boys and girls, when they come running down with a burning tire and they have improvised guns. Now they see the result of the violence every day. They suffer from it. You would say they'd all be pacifists. No, the opposite. You know, they take any broomstick and pretend it's a Kalashnikov. They want to shoot. They want to do like the others.
But this is how also you deal with the violence around you. You try to contain it through forms of repetition and mimicry. It's a form of also dealing with the violence. Perhaps there are questions in the audience. It's a good time maybe to open it up a little bit. I will...
Hey, I'm Shakib. I just wanted to ask you about, just like talking about your artistry, there was an interesting conversation which went on about like self-indulgence in filmmaking and your responsibility to the audience. So I just wanted to know what your approach to like filmmaking is. Because like I was there for your masterclass 2 days ago, and you said that you go to these diverse cultures and you find yourself immediately immersed in them, and you try to not see them for their culture, but just see them as someone you're familiar with. So like whenever you're like going to these traveling to like places of different culture and just like dipping your toes in their waters, like how do you approach like recording and shooting like people from different culture? Like how do you toe the line between self-indulgence and responsibility to the culture and responsibility to the audience? What's basically your approach? Do you ever like find yourself criticizing yourself for making the work too self-indulging, in the sense that that you're making something of someone else's culture for yourself more than the people of that culture. So just what's your like ethical approach to filmmaking there?
Okay, sorry. We had just saying how hard it sometimes is to understand exactly, you know, when we talk what the other side means. I can only tell you that from my beginnings in the Nouvelle Vague in France and with the directors, the most important question was always, on n'a pas le droit de faire ça. One is not allowed to show this, or one is not allowed to stage a thing in a certain way. Even with the cinematographers, like Pierre Lhomme or so, I once told him, and he was very pleased. I said, you know what I like about your cinematography? It's ethic. It's ethical. It's you don't manipulate the image. You take a certain distance from things. With your lighting, you don't emphasize things that should not be emphasized. You don't embellish, but you don't make ugly either. You find always kind of a juste milieu. So much so that after seeing the first images from the concentration camps in 1956, I swear, never ever to make a movie in a camp. This is beyond representation. This is beyond staging. You know, I cannot go around and cast a lot of bony and skeleton people and stage that type of horror is beyond the reach of art, of our cinema art. Then came the unfamous Holocaust series with the young Meryl Streep, which I found horrible. Just like that proves that I was right to say never ever. But then came Sophie's Choice, and then came The Pianist, and slowly there was a new genre, like there had been film noir, and there are musical comedies, and there are westerns, and there are Holocaust movies. And I still don't believe that it's feasible. I mean, I then tried very carefully in the Ninth Day about a priest in the camp in Dachau, which was not a so-called extermination camp. But I'm always totally aware of this, often too much so. I mean, like if you see regular movies, you know, you see what sells, and that your attitude towards what can be shown and what cannot be shown is not exactly helpful if you want to make a commercial career. But that is our responsibility, and everybody defines it in a different way. One would say this can't be shown, and the other says no. But this has to be shown, but it has to be shown differently. And I watched this morning his film, 9 minutes film, just about a shot and a reverse shot between a photographer and a sniper. And that is a way to ethically represent violence and treat it. Of course, it's not very mainstream either.
I have the mic here. Anyone?
Hi, I'm Nicola. Thank you for your talk. I have one question, but I have a first question. So when I saw the movie, I saw it in German. And of course, the context of the movie is a bit multilingual because there is French, English, and Arabic. And I saw with with subtitles, and the subtitles were for French and English. So first, do you confirm that for all the conversation in Arabic, there was no subtitles in the original version? There were. There are.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have.
okay.
I mean, sometimes there is like background talk, chatter, so it's not subtitled. But some of them they say, "Let's go to the shelter," or "Do you want coffee?" Like they're subtitled.
Okay, no, then my question doesn't make sense any longer because it was linked to the fact that the version I saw was without subtitles for all the parts in Arabic.
Yeah. So I watched it again today and I noticed. So like there are some like background chatter in Arabic that's not subtitled.
Yeah.
But sometimes like the woman who lives, like sometimes they say they go to the shelter and so on, and then you see.
Where there is a whole scene in the village up in the mountains, where then there is a shooting, and one of these horrible incidents, and that is only among Lebanese of different factions, and they all speak Arabic, of course, and they're all subtitled. Yeah. Even though it doesn't make sense, because Bruno Ganz, who is there and who is we are supposed to identify with him, well, he didn't have subtitles nor a translator, but I wanted it to be known.
I'm sorry then, because
I didn't see it in a long time. I may even be wrong. As I speak, I realize that one of the officers turns to him and translates for him what this woman just has been saying, like something like it. But in Damour, you shot all our people. So I'm not quite sure how we handled it.
yeah, I can extend it because in the version I saw clearly if you
There is only one version of this film.
so lacking completely the subtitles in Arabic.
The French and the German and the English language as it is, yeah, and of course the Arabic as it is, yeah.
Okay, because the one I saw was with subtitles for French and English, and no subtitles for German, of course, and for Arabic. And so, of course, the impression I had is that the perspective was very much centered on the character of Bruno.
Of course. Yeah, it is. Okay. The whole film, in the film class, they just left. They have to go to another class. I said the first decision for a filmmaker is always, is this a story I tell in the first person or in the third person? And of course, this is the typical first-person story. It's we see him at home with his wife. He goes to the airport. He comes there. We just follow him. We never cut to the other side. We always see everything from his perspective. And the sad thing is, we don't always approve of what he is doing, and so often we don't understand him because, well. Okay, it's too late now, but it's always interesting. I love to debate these questions also with the students or with my own editor to start with, because if it's wrong, then you better know for the next time to do it different. But it is somehow beyond your control. Sometimes you manage that everybody is in sync with your character. It's especially important in the first person narration. When I say narration, I don't mean that there's an off-screen voice, which actually there is. But narration is whether the camera tells it from one POV or is it like God's eye and we see all the characters in the same value, yeah.
Yeah, thank you to all of you. I have two interrelated questions. The one is, what struck me on the one hand is this kind of a requirement that the movie was supposed to be shot, or that the people in Lebanon asked you to shoot the movie in Lebanon. And on the other hand, Hoda said, well, but this is not my movie. And Hoda, to you, how could it be your movie? Because there's a German journalist. He is at the center of the story. And so far, I would have liked to know, first of all, what is your experience when you said that, because you said it a little bit in a way of distancing you very much yourself from the movie. But as I said, I mean, it couldn't be your movie, or it couldn't be your experience, of course. And that is related to another question that I had for Volker Schlöndorff. And that is, I remember that I saw the movie 40 years ago when it came out, together with another movie, and that was Reds by Warren Beatty. And I remember there was a huge debate about this movie, and I remember that I watched your movie against this debate, and that was, is it legitimate to shoot a movie about a private love story? I mean, it was John Reed on the one hand, but a private love story that is in the foreground against the historical background of the Russian Revolution. And I thought a little bit the same thing. How legitimate, even though that people asked you to shoot the movie in Lebanon, how legitimate is it to focus on a German character? Not so much the German character is the problem, but to take this kind of historical, in quotation marks, background, or the actual war situation, to focus on a foreigner in the movie. So, and that correlates in Hoda's critique on your movie and the distancing. Although I would say, well, Hoda, it couldn't be your movie.
No, Klaus, I think when I said it is not my film, it's because it's really a German film. Even the Lebanon, no, because you have to be, if there is some image to represent you, you have to feel a little link, a little reaction about this Lebanese people they pass on the film. When I see the film, maybe 40 years ago, I didn't like it. Not because he don't represent me. I didn't like the German story, not the Lebanese story.
That's what I understood today.
It is, and it wasn't because I have a kind of position or opinion. From 17 ans, when I was 17, I had never been into a group and to tell it's not representing me. Nothing represents me like Hoda Barakat. Nothing and nobody. Even what I wrote until now, and maybe I will change my mind and decide to renounce of what I ever. And the stories I tell, it's about people. They have no engagement, and they has every time question, and they look for their selves, but they are Lebanese on the film don't seem like Lebanese. It's like a little caricature. It's not to him to recognize Lebanese. There is some fault. For example, the crucifix of the Christian force Lebanese, it is not the same they used, because it was a scene identitaire. There is too many faults representing this kind of people, because I was there. And it is not necessary to be there. I'm not okay with the first proposition you talking about, Rabia talking about. Yani I don't have to be there to recognize myself or not. I can, yani I left Lebanon from maybe, but I'm still there. I still have my antenna there. If I walk on the street, I can't recognize a Lebanese. Yani I cannot explain why there is this kind of distance. I feel it when I saw the film, and now when I when I see it again, because I tried to see it now, and I didn't really change my mind. So maybe I will never be able to explain what is when you feel that you are involved in something. I can see Iranian film. I'm very, very far away from all Iranian things, and feel that maybe this child or this, it is not, I cannot explain it. I try to be clear, but if I'm here, it's because I love this genial monsieur. And I didn't understand why the Lebanese was working with him don't really talk with him to tell him, no, it's not like this, it's a caricature. We are living in tragedy, and you have a counselor to film like a caricature. We are not, we are not like this at all. It was boring, not really very blessant. So n'était pas blessant. It was not very dangerous for us, but for me it was a very not a very interesting film. So I'm sorry. So I'm sorry to tell this, but because I love really the work of Sándor. Sinon, otherwise, why I'm here? Why you want me to be here? I'm not a filmmaker, and I'm not personally invite Mr. Sándor. If I'm here, it's because I love him so much.
Thank you. I still would like to, thank you very much. I would still like to answer your question about is it legitimate to have a love story within a war movie and so on. First of all, everything is legitimate or not. I mean, there is no such rules. But in this case, I come always back to the whole thing. I might have done a movie not in Lebanon, but about a journalist in Argentina during the civil war there. I was not aiming specifically at this, but once you not the idea, the Absicht, the intention. The intention was to say that a journalist who goes into a war zone or anywhere else is not neutral. He is a human being. He has he carries with him the conflict with his wife at home. At the same time, he's tempted by an adventure. If already he is far away. In this case, then he is to find out that there is another man who is more important to Anashigula than himself, and that he was just sort of a moment's weakness. And all that comes together, unbeknownst to himself most of the time, when he writes now the article that is going to be printed. And we read this article, as if it was written by someone totally neutral and without emotions and sensibility, as if he was giving us the straight facts. When in fact it's unavoidable that every journalist, in a sense, is a novelist. And every document he writes, in a sense, is fiction. Because it's reflected through a personal experience. And therefore, this whatever love story or so in the foreground is legitimate because it explains somehow. I mean, he would not get out his knife and kill this poor guy who falls upon him if he hadn't seen Hana Shigula's Palestinian handsome boyfriend coming out of her house just before.
Yeah, just I want to add one thing on your answer. Is like we were like fed up also with journalists and war journalists mainly, who come and cover war zones. Of course, they wrote their stories. It's like fictional and like it's subjective. It's like, although it looks like neutral, but anyway, they always reduce the events or like what they are witnessing and what they are covering. They reduce it into victims and criminals, like, and good side, bad side. Like they write it like in a simplified narrative for like the readers to understand like what's going in this war or that war. Like, okay, there is bad, there is good, there is like, or two bads, they are like fighting each other, like now in Sudan, like how they put it. It's which is like in reality, it's much more complex and much more complicated, and this is actually one of the points that I respect in this film a lot, is that this journalist came. It's a story about this journalist, a war journalist. Like he is coming to see wars, and actually he left with a crime, and when he goes to Germany to give the reports, he just he said like no way, like it was impossible to reduce it in 25 pages or like to 22 pages or like, well, because they were like asking how many pages you want to write. Like it's like, it's what is this? It's you cannot reduce it like with this number of things.
One last question.
I just wanted to say that, you know, any good art is the function of any good art is to evoke emotions and to start conversation. It's not good art if it doesn't start conversation. And we had some good conversation on the way home after seeing your film last night, and it's you're mixing fact and fiction. It's art. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Volker, thank you. Huda, Nabir, thank you everyone.